Hello and welcome to episode 3 of my podcast series, Interviews with Educators. Today, I'm again speaking with Katrin Brait. Katrin is a community builder and a facilitator of conversations, mostly between families, schools, and learners. For many years, she has focused on bringing consent-based leadership, democratic decision-making, and embodied practices like movement, play, and time in nature into schooling spaces. Katrin really cares about making communication humane, grounded, and sustainable. And hello, if you're new, I'm Christina Kottmann. I'm a former international educator, and I worked for a decade in international schools in Saudi Arabia, India, and Brazil. Now I work as a consultant helping school leaders to embed well-being practices, to strengthen their foreign hire onboarding system, and to make sure that the school culture represents the needs of the educators, the learners, and the families in their community. One reason I do this podcast is to amplify a lot of the ideas that are already happening in great places around the world and bring forward the folks who are leading that change. Welcome back, Katrin. I am so excited to talk to you in episode 3, where we're discussing schools. We've kind of gone through this series in the podcast of talking about your experience and then how you're supporting families. And now we get to the point of talking about schools, because schools are these big organizations that often have a lot of values on paper, but do they actually play out those values in real life, in daily practice? And I think a lot of times schools will say a lot of great things, particularly about supporting their individuals and believing in self-expression, but it might not actually come through. So when you work with schools, what do you notice first when you walk in?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, like really visualizing myself walking into a school. And I think the first thing, no, I don't think that's important. You walk into a school and you get a feeling. You you connect to the atmosphere. And maybe as grown-ups, we don't be very alert with that anymore. But children definitely do. They come in and they feel like, okay, that feels good. That feels safe. So there's this first impression you get. And then I try to stay in this visualization. I always hope that there will be children. They just come and like, hey, hello, how are you? What are you doing here? And you get kind of introduced to school by them. Or they're just running around and they have no notion of you because they're so busy with their own things. So these two kinds of things I really love when I come into a school, because then there's this first impression of, okay, children matter. Their voices, their opinions, their needs matter, because you can see that they have this space to move around, to be open with grown-ups and not like defensive. Okay, what are you coming to do? Are you going to tell me something? In which category I have to put you in? So it's a difference. So that's actually how I walk into a school, like what I noticed the first moment, like how do the children react to me?
Yeah. And in a lot of schools that say they are rights respecting, and they use this as a real point in, communicating with families, like we respect the rights of all the individuals in our classrooms, all the educators in our campus. What do we think about the possibility that they say that on paper, and then in practice, it becomes more top-down compliance, this idea that, I'll respect your opinions if they agree with my opinion, particularly for the learners, because I think that children will really quickly pick up on that discrepancy. But what have you seen when you've talked to schools or talked to educators in that context?
Now, what I see is like most of the times, if you say we are right respecting, then it's getting difficult, because we still in our society, we are still there's a lot of inequality. So that's how, especially as grown-ups, the space we grow up in. So it's in us. So to say like, okay, we're doing it never really works, because we can't, because we don't have this in us yet. So schools who say like, that's what we're aiming at, and we are rights respecting, but we are learning, then you're on the right point. Then you're really interested in like, but how does it work? So you can want it, like, and that's also what brought me, like also with democratic education, I did this kind of informal research on equality. Yeah? Like what does it mean? And I was asking a lot of questions to everyone. And actually it was a 4-year-old boy who gave me the answer. Of the answer I could do something with, because he got all these different answers, like still like couldn't feel it. What's equality about? And this 4-year-old boy, he was playing, and I was asking him, and I was like thinking, okay, now I'm getting completely crazy asking a 4-year-old about like this kind of political question. And he said like, everybody is right. And then he went on playing. And so he left me like, he's right. It was really this kind of thing. Just everybody is right. Like you have your own truths, your own values, your own, and your child has the same, and the teacher has the same. And it's not about who is right, but it's about how do we collaborate with each other then? How do we use this our truth when we face another truth, or we have the conflict, getting conflict with another truth? And that's the most important thing. And if you can create this space talking about it and finding a way to address these things or making space for it, I think that's it. It's like you make space for this different kind of truth and to figure out how to do it together. And actually that's for me the center of everything. And I think also like this role modeling, it's so hard. I still have this picture from my oldest daughter. She was really fierce also when she was young, and she always wanted to do everything herself, and everything was hard for her, but she chose it. It was like, no, I do it myself. And then I had this discussion with her, and I didn't really notice how I was reacting, but suddenly she would stand there like, and then tell me shouting that I shouldn't shout. That doesn't work. It was really like, did I shout? Okay, yes, I did. And yeah, you're right, it's not working. So I think it's always very important that we are not always aware of what we do. And if we want to be rights respecting at a school for children, we have to listen to them. We have to have a podium where they can bring in their issues, because for sure there are a lot of situations where we don't respect the rights.
Yeah. You're making me think about how schools often want to portray this level of, we know exactly what your child needs. We know exactly how to do it. We have such qualified educators. We're experts in the field. Like, all of that security can also kind of damage the actual need to continue evaluating and continue gathering feedback to improve their process. If they say we already have all the answers, why would they keep growing? Why would they keep trying to develop their communications, their relationships with the families, their community, and their learners if they already know exactly what to do? And I think that's the point about how schools can say that this label, that label, whatever, but they always have to be kind of looking at it at the distance. You know, we're aiming to be rights respecting. We're aiming to be a values-based school, but we're always in this constant process of reevaluating and noticing and observing, like, where could we have stepped out of line? Okay, that was a mistake. Let's step back in and decide what else is going on. You know, if you have certain learners that are challenging in your class, you can see it as an opportunity to say, I don't actually know how best to meet these learners' needs. That's not because I've failed as an expert professional educator. It's because I'm constantly learning, constantly growing through this process with them. And that's what I think schools and society can also value more. So as we think about what self-directed learning can teach traditional schools, what do you think the big messages that you would plunk into a traditional school today, if you possibly could?
Yeah, that's a good question, because self-directed learning very often is brought in the same space with this enormous freedom. Mm-hmm. They can choose everything and all. And it's a very big misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. And I also saw it in democratic schools, then, okay, the freedom is everything. And it's not. It's autonomy is important, but relatedness as much as autonomy. And building your skills is also very important. So having this learning experience that you can learn stuff. in schools, we always you always have to know everything already. And if I'm as a teacher modeling this thing, I know everything. It's just as a child, it's like, whoa, I never can reach that. Because you face all these moments where you don't know things, but you should know, or maybe you. So it's creating this tension. And as a teacher, you have this tension because you have to know everything, and you don't. You know that you don't in the most cases. So also giving permission to schools to not know everything, and that we can do as a parent of a society, like, because it's this really places where everything comes, really complex organization with all these stakeholders in there. It's so complex. If you can handle that, you can handle every organization, because it's so complex. And giving yourself the permission to not being right or to fail. And I think that's schools. I would love a school to say like, oh, we fail very often. Do you join us? Because then we're learning. And from my experience, the moments as a facilitator, I didn't know things I really should know. It was the most learning experience, the greatest learning for the students, because they really like, okay, oh, that's funny, she doesn't know. So we get all this pressure. So it was all this like, and then I one situation, I always, even because something mixed up in my brain and I couldn't calculate anymore. I had to show them how we calculated it. But I'm also like in Austria, I learned a different way. So you think calculating is one way because it's so exact. No, it's not, because in Austria you learn a different way than in the Netherlands. So I had to ask a colleague, like, can you help? Because I went back, I was looking from a distance, and I just couldn't do it anymore in my brain. I was completely frozen. So I asked a colleague, and she helped me, and the students were really like, oh, that's so funny, that's so funny. But it was a small group of students with fear of failure and very anxious, and it was completely gone. The next lesson they came in, nothing anymore. It was really like, okay, wow, that's amazing. Because they were completely, it's okay. We still respect her, and she didn't know. And it's very funny that she didn't know, because it's very easy. I can do it, she can't. But it's this respect, because of the relation, you respect each other. And they're really like, oh, but I can do this too. I can experiment, I can find out. And then you really understand what you learn. And I think that's also with schools, like, if you know everything and you put everything out there, children manage to take in the information, but there's no real understanding or real learning. Not for all of them. I think there's still children who can do it on themselves at home, or they figure out the context. But this real understanding, and I saw this very often with children in play, then suddenly something happens and you can feel it. It's like, whoa. And then they sit there, it's like, and then you know, they understand. So I had my own daughter, she was playing with kind of candies. She was sitting next to me in the car and she was playing with candies. And it was like, okay, I want to leave you, but you shouldn't play with candies. It's like, so I nearly said something to her, but then I recognized, okay, but there's something going on. So I let her play, and she took it out of a box and back into the box. And suddenly she would say 2, and she would put them back and out again, and some back, 2. So she was really with these numbers. And then she had 3. And this was the moment when I recognized that she really understands the concept of 2, the concept of 3. What does it mean? Not only it's a number, and if I calculate them, or if I add them, then 2 and 3 is 5, but really understanding the concept of numbers. And then I saw this very often. That's so amazing, because then you have these basics you easily can adjust. And you easily can build on all the other techniques. Because if we are honest, like this calculating stuff, especially in primary schools of learning reading, it's only a technique. It's not more. And we offer so many hours, so many effort into this technique. But when you have this basics going on and this motivation that you say, oh, it would be nice to have a technique so I can read all this stuff, then it's much easier. And you don't need all this time and this pressure and this motivational things. I think with schools, what I would love to do, and this is collaborations I have, because I'm more, like you said, with parents and with the community. We want to bring to schools this freedom, freeing of this. We have to know how it works. But find a framework. And I think it's important to make decisions. What's our framework? So people know what they can expect and what to relate on. And it doesn't have to be better than the other school, or it doesn't have to be more than the other school, because all these individuals, and that's what I hope that we go do, that like my three daughters had complete different schooling. Everyone choose the way that fits yourself.
Yeah, you're bringing up a memory for me that in my classrooms, because I taught elementary grades, right? I had a class where there were several students that I was just not exactly sure, is this working for them? Are they going home and feeling stressed? Like, could I be doing something better? And I remember finally letting down my guard as like, I'm supposed to be the teacher who knows everything, when I had a conversation with one of the families. And they basically said, we know you're trying your best, but it's not working for our kid. So can we teach you what we do and you can try that? And because I'd had this wall up about feeling like I had to be the professional, I always had to know, I always had to figure it out. Like I was reading through the books, I was asking colleagues. It occurred to me that the parents were probably the best experts in their kid. And they were so gracious with offering, like, we do this with him, and that actually is more successful than all of these strategies you've been trying. And I was like, sometimes we just have to remember that everyone's an expert in themselves, and that families are going to know much more about their child and about their child's needs than I'm going to know in just knowing them for a couple of months. And that's okay. And it's the same with if you're working in a school setting that you're new to, maybe you're a school leader. It's never going to be that you suddenly know everything just because you've been given that title or that role. You need to be able to, lessen that responsibility in a way and say, please teach me about how it works here. Please teach me about how we culturally relate to each other. Please teach me about what I could do better as a school leader. And a lot of times I think that comes through as humility, but I would say it's more of like actual courage, because you're expecting that as a model of learning, and especially as a school leader, you're saying, I cannot possibly have all the answers. I learn through the community. I learn through the experiences that we're having together. And I'm never going to be on a pedestal. I don't want you to put me on a pedestal as the one and only leader. Whether it's a classroom teacher, a parent, or a school leader, I think there's a really strong responsibility to show the students that we're constantly making mistakes. We're laughing about getting the math problems wrong. And that's what we want them to experience when they go into professional roles. So to wrap up this episode, I just wonder if there's anything else you would like to share with a school leader or an educator who might be listening.
Yeah, I think this, what you said, like, please open up to parents, because that's very often still an issue. Like inviting them in as experts on their child, because they know what the children like, how things work for them, but also in the same way taking leadership on this learning journey. Tell the parents also, okay, you can tell me what works for your child, but in the end, I figured out with your child in the classroom. We too have to do it. So I'm very happy that you tell me how it works. And the other way around, I also can help you because I'm looking from a wider view. You have your child and you're very protective of this child and you want to have the best. So what's the issue? I can help you with trusting in this path your child is walking. Because with school, it's going into independence. It's going away from you in their own world. They do things themselves. A kind of telling the environment and the network your child is in, like how your child works, is nice. But like we said earlier, making your children advocate for themselves is even much stronger.
Yeah, it's more sustainable.
That's what I can say also. Yeah, more sustainable. And like the school leader and the teachers, don't be afraid of these children. Mm-hmm. If you have a child that's advocating itself or not able to adapt, maybe that's adapt to the environment I'm in, be curious. Mm-hmm. Go there and find out what they need.
Yeah.
And make change in the environment and magic starts happening because it's fine for everyone.
Exactly. And as we said before, there's never one right way to do it. Most decisions are reversible. And if you're opening up your mind and being curious and, asking for other experiences, you can learn too.
Yeah. And maybe that's the end, because like what I found out was in the democratic education, giving this much freedom, like what do you want to do, is very often too much, especially in a group and in an artificial setting like a school is. So I start like, okay, we're going to do this today. And then you find out, but then there's someone who's like, I don't like that. Okay, what do you want to do then? But if they don't care, then you just do this and then it's fine. So you don't have to throw everything open. If someone has some arguments of things like, I don't like this, maybe we can do it differently. Listen to them. Be curious.
Exactly.
And if it's possible, it's possible. If not possible, tell them, okay, I can't do this now, but it's very interesting. Maybe we can bring it on. So, don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be afraid to try it, I think there's a lot of fear built into our society, as we've been talking about. And that kind of leads to the next conversation that we're going to have in episode 4 about what the future of education could possibly look like. We know that supporting humans is where a lot of schools are going rather than focusing on compliance and grades. But what does that actually all mean? So we hope that you join us for episode 4, and we'll see you there.